This is the kind of show that makes you realize those nerdy chemistry kids are actually kinda cool, and calling them aliens might not be fair, because if one day you suddenly turned into stone, they'd be the only ones who could save your sorry butt. Welcome to Dr. Stone, where our main guy, Ishigami Senku, a high school prodigy, has been obsessed with science since he was knee-high. Even as a kid, he was out there cooking up experiments way beyond his age level. Right by his side, since they're running around naked in the rain, childhood days, is Taiju Oki, your typical musclehead who's dumb as a rock but strong and kind to a fault. Basically, the kind of dude you call when you need to lift heavy stuff or go buy materials for your inventions. Neither of them had any idea that they were about to become the saviors of the entire human race. One day, just as Taiju's about to confess to his crush, this weird green light flashes across the whole planet, bam! Everyone turns into stone statues. Centuries pass, no humans, no civilization, nature reclaims everything, buildings crumble, vines take over, the earth returns to the Stone Age. Meanwhile, while frozen in stone, Senku keeps his brain running by literally counting seconds non-stop so he wouldn't lose consciousness. And finally, one spring day, crack, the stone shell breaks, and our science boy wakes up after 3.700 years. Yes, he even got the number of years right down to the second. That's Senku for you. Once he figures out the timeline, Senku immediately starts rebuilding civilization from scratch. He begins with the basics, ropes, fire, and even a lakeside hut. But soon he realizes, being smart isn't enough to survive out here. He needs muscle, a big dude, someone with long arms and broad shoulders to help him with the heavy stuff. And who does he dig up right next to his revival spot? Lucky guess, Taiju himself. Next mission, figure out how to unstone his brawny buddy. While experimenting, Senku discovers this cave filled with a nasty smell, nitric acid. Or more specifically, bat poop. Yup, that's science. After testing some petrified hair with the dripping water, he realizes, this stuff might be the key to revival. Excited, Senku collects the liquid and splashes it onto Taiju's statue. Nothing happens. He tries it on birds, also nothing. But Senku's not the type to get discouraged, failure is just data. As he says, true scientist vibes. So he leaves Taiju in the cave, figuring maybe it just needs more time. 6 months later, crack, the stone breaks, and Taiju finally wakes up. Barely back to life, the musclehead immediately runs off to find Yuzuriya, his crush, of course. But this, too, was part of Senku's plan. He'd left a message knowing Taiju would come find him after reviving. After 3.700 years and 6 months, the two bros reunite at last. Now, with Senku's brain and Taiju's brawn, they've got the ultimate combo to save humanity. They're basically the Adam and Eve of the stone world, though Senku refuses to say which one's Eve. But reviving the whole of mankind isn't as simple as carrying every statue into a cave and waiting 6 months. Senku starts collecting the cave liquid for study. After countless failed experiments, he gets a brilliant idea. Mix the nitric acid with alcohol to create nitol, a super corrosive solvent that can dissolve the petrified shell. The catch? Not every kind of booze works. They need strong alcohol. So, after a full year of trial and error, they finally brew the perfect stuff, and when they pour their new, holy water, onto a petrified bird, again, not Senku's bird, it comes back to life. Their experiment is a total success. Now, they finally have a way to fast-forward the revival of all humanity, one bottle of science at a time. With the first successful batch of revival fluid ready, Senku gives Taiju the special honor of choosing who they should bring back next. And obviously, no need to ask, he picks Yuzuriya, his beloved crush. But just as he's about to pour the magic juice on her, Taiju suddenly realizes, uh-oh, she's completely naked. So, being the gentleman he is, he decides to move her somewhere safe and find her some clothes first. Before they can even move, though, boom, a pack of lions shows up. Yeah, actual lions. Realizing they can't outrun them, Taiju plans to sacrifice himself to buy time for Senku and Yuzuriya to escape. But Senku yells, hell no, because without Taiju's muscles, there's no way he can rebuild civilization. Then Taiju remembers someone who might be able to help. Shishio Tsukasa, the strongest primate high schooler. Yes, that's literally his title. They decide to use up all their remaining revival fluid to unstone him. And the moment Tsukasa wakes up, he instantly sizes up the situation, charges straight at the alpha male lion, and punches it to death with one hit. The lionesses, seeing their big boss down, take one look and peace out immediately. Just like that, the group gains its third member. Tsukasa becomes the team's protector and main hunter. Every time he goes out hunting or fishing, he comes back with tons of food, so much that even Taiju's supersized stomach can't handle it all. But too much food means waste. And waste is a crime against science, so Senku decides to smoke the meat to kill bacteria and preserve it longer. Now that food and safety are handled, Senku can finally start his true mission, rebuilding human civilization. The first thing he needs? Calcium carbonate. Why? Because it's insanely useful for 4 things: improving soil for farming, making mortar for construction, producing soap to kill germs. And the 4th? Senku keeps that one secret, because he's already starting to suspect that Tsukasa isn't as pure-hearted as he seems. And he's right. Turns out, Tsukasa once got his face smashed by a drunk old man, all because he was collecting seashells as a gift for his bedridden little sister. That trauma shaped his dream. When he rebuilds the world, he wants a perfect paradise only for the pure-hearted. No corrupt adults, no greedy politicians, just the innocent youth. To him, anyone evil doesn't deserve to be revived. But Senku can't agree with that. He's a scientist. And to him, everyone deserves to be saved, good or bad. Senku quickly realizes that with Tsukasa's strength and cold logic, he's way too dangerous to control. Thankfully, the secret of the revival formula hasn't leaked yet, because if Tsukasa learns how to make it himself, it's game over. Still, no matter how smart you are, you can't predict one thing. A dumb teammate who blurts out everything. Right on cue, Taiju comes running up, yelling at the top of his lungs. Senku, we've got enough revival fluid to save Yuzuria. Yeah, nice one, buddy. Senku is beyond words, but at this point, there's no stopping it. He agrees to let Tsukasa come see their miracle, human reviving, potion in action. This time, Taiju has everything prepared, even clothes for Yuzuria, so no wardrobe malfunctions. But as Senku checks the mixture, he realizes the fluid isn't quite enough yet. He quickly sends Taiju to fetch more from the cave, but Tsukasa stops him, saying he'll go instead. Which is exactly what Senku wanted. The moment Tsukasa leaves, Senku explains everything to Taiju, and together they mix up the final batch to free Yuzuria. It takes a while, but finally, crack, the stone shell breaks, and Yuzuria opens her eyes after thousands of years. But time's short, Tsukasa will be back any moment. Senku lays out two plans, the three of them run away. They stay and fight Tsukasa head-on. Without hesitation, both Taiju and Yuzuria choose option 2, stand and fight. Right at that moment, Tsukasa came back, and he didn't even bother hiding his plan. He was ready to smash all three of them with brute force. Taiju had no choice but to ask his buddy to look after his crush while he charged at Tsukasa full-on, even with Senku covering him with a crossbow. Taiju didn't know how to fight and didn't want to fight, so Tsukasa knocked him out cold in one hit. With that beatdown, Taiju was going to be out for days. You'd think that, with Taiju out of the way, Tsukasa would tear into the other two and eat them for lunch, but no. He just turned and left, issuing a cool as ice threat. If Senku tried to stop him, the whole crew would be wiped out. Once Tsukasa was gone, Senku woke Taiju up. There was no way they could take on that muscle monster directly, but science could. They needed to get to Hakone to gather materials for weapons. Before they left, they trashed the place to make a fake scene and throw Tsukasa off their trail. Then set off on an 80-kilometer trek. They got lost a few times along the way. Senku used a hexagonal lens to take bearings. But it wasn't super accurate. Lucky break. Yuzuria recognized a giant Buddha statue she'd visited with her family. That gave Senku's group a fix on their location, and they were able to get back on track. Right after that little win, Taiju noticed Yuzuria still had some petrified patches on her foot. She insisted she was fine, but Taiju poured a little revival fluid on the spot anyway. The ache and damage in her foot vanished. Senku explained that the reverse petrification process actually triggers a sort of self-repair mechanism. So even if they had cracks and injuries in their flesh, they still lived. Science. Weird, but helpful. After a long walk, the group reached Hakone and found a hot spring rich in sulfur. And what's sulfur famous for? You know this one, gunpowder. Because in front of a gun's mouth, everyone is equal. Meanwhile, Tsukasa had tracked the traces of Senku's group. It didn't take him 5 minutes to guess Senku's aim, and he immediately raced off to stop them. Back with Senku's 3-person team, Senku had already identified 3 ingredients for gunpowder: sulfur from the hot spring, charcoal from burning dead wood, and pre-made potassium nitrate. First you mix them in the classic ratio, 75% potassium nitrate, 10% sulfur, 15% charcoal, and add a little glucose to boost the burn. This is the top-tier recipe, officially approved by Samsung. Kids, do not try this at home. Finally, you apply physical force until the mix compacts into a solid mass, and that's your product. When Taiju heard the phrase, apply physical force, he got all excited, picking up rocks, smashing things, and nearly blew the whole place sky high. But thanks to that idiotic stunt, Senku actually got to test the explosive power of the new gunpowder they'd made. Yuzuria was worried that Senku would use the gunpowder to attack Tsukasa, but he assured her that he only meant to use it as leverage for negotiation. Only if absolutely necessary would he actually fire it. While they were still trying to put out the smoke from the explosion, the group noticed another column of smoke in the distance. It definitely wasn't Tsukasa's, which could only mean one thing: other survivors. Thinking quickly, Senku and his crew set off a few more explosions to send smoke signals, which, unfortunately, worked a little too well. Because guess who found them thanks to those smoke signals? Yep, Tsukasa. While Taiju was off gathering firewood, Tsukasa arrived and took Yuzuria hostage. He demanded that Senku hand over the formula for the revival fluid in exchange for her freedom. If Senku submitted, he'd be spared, but if he resisted, Tsukasa would cut him down without hesitation. Seeing Tsukasa's knife pressed against Yuzuria's throat, Senku had no choice but to reveal the formula. True to his word, Tsukasa released Yuzuria, but Senku still refused to surrender. He was loyal to science to the very end. Tsukasa truly didn't want to kill Senku, but he had no choice. Senku calmly said, "If that's the case, at least make it quick and painless." Tsukasa agreed and chose the cleanest method possible, snapping Senku's neck in one precise motion. When Taiju returned with the firewood a little later, a chill ran down his spine. Something was wrong. He rushed back, only to find Senku's lifeless body. You'd expect Taiju to lose it and go berserk on Tsukasa, but Taiju wasn't that kind of guy. He was too kind to hurt anyone, and with the situation being what it was, running was the only smart move. In a rare moment of quick thinking, Taiju teamed up with Yuzuriya to fool Tsukasa. They smashed rocks onto the leftover gunpowder, creating a massive explosion to blind their enemy and made off with Senku's body. Good news, Tsukasa didn't chase them. Bad news, they now had to find a way to revive a guy with a broken neck. No medicine, no doctor, no hospital. Maybe a magic kiss would work? Nah, better not. Still, Taiju knew his best friend too well. There was no way Senku would die like that, not without a plan. He must have left behind some kind of backup trick or clue. Yuzuriya then remembered how Senku had actually told Tsukasa to aim for his neck. That had to mean something. Using what little brainpower he had left, Taiju realized that ever since Senku's revival, he'd often twist his neck, something he never used to do before. That had to be the key. Sure enough, when they checked, the back of Senku's neck still had a small patch that hadn't been fully depetrified. If they used the revival fluid on that area, the reversed petrification might just heal his broken neck. That was their only hope, and miraculously, it worked. The revival fluid repaired Senku's neck during the reawakening process. No time to celebrate, though. They had to plan their next move against Tsukasa. Senku assigned Yuzuriya to pretend to side with Tsukasa and act as an undercover spy, while Taiju would protect her. Since Tsukasa believed Senku was dead, their presence wouldn't arouse suspicion. As for Senku, he would go into hiding and begin building a kingdom of science to one day defeat Tsukasa. They parted ways, not knowing when they'd see each other again. But one thing was certain, they would rebuild humanity. Meanwhile, on his way back to the cave, Tsukasa was suddenly attacked by a blonde girl. Her reason? She had witnessed him kill someone earlier. But Tsukasa didn't have time for this nonsense. His top priority was to get back and protect the precious revival fluid source. So he made quick work of the mysterious girl, chopping down a tree beside the road and letting it crash right on top of her. Hearing the loud thud, Senku came to check it out and found the girl trapped under the log. Luckily for her, nothing was broken, just a bit stuck. That gave Senku enough time to whip out one of humanity's greatest inventions, the pulley. With this simple machine, even a scrawny guy like him could lift a few hundred kilograms of wood, the same tool. He joked that aliens probably used to build the pyramids. But the thing that impressed the girl wasn't the pulley. It was Senku's confidence and problem-solving skills. After being freed, she introduced herself as Kohaku, and decided to take this fascinating young man to visit her village. On the way, Kohaku stopped by a hot spring to fetch some healing water for her sister. She casually hoisted up a 50-liter jug like it was nothing. Senku, being the gentleman and scientist he was, told her to relax and let him handle it, meaning he'd use science to do the heavy lifting. He quickly rigged up a makeshift downhill cart using the pulley system, which worked surprisingly well. The only problem was, he hadn't invented brakes yet, so the stopping part got a little messy. Still, they made it. Before Senku stood Kohaku's village, about 40 people, living a full-on Stone Age lifestyle. When he tried to enter, he was stopped by two guards, Kinro and Ginro, who said outsiders weren't allowed, even if that outsider just saved the village chief's daughter. Rules were rules. Kohaku was ready to fight her way through, but Senku decided to lighten the mood with a little trick, blowing soap bubbles. Just that alone was enough to blow the minds of the villagers, who had never seen such a thing. Senku immediately realized how primitive this place was and hatched a plan: win them over with science. However, not everyone in the village was clueless. One young man named Chrome, known as the Great Sorcerer, actually understood what the bubbles were, and challenged Senku to a battle of wits. First, they needed space. Chrome led Senku to his laboratory, which was basically a shack full of random junk he collected. There, Chrome dramatically wrapped a cloth around his head and showed off his ultimate trick, creating rainbow-colored fire. Leaving everyone wide-eyed in awe, everyone except Senku, of course. Senku knew exactly how it worked. Throw salt for yellow flames, copper for blue-green, and sulfur for purple. Easy. Not ready to back down, Chrome pulled out his prized possession, a mysterious, hot sphere that generated static electricity when rubbed. Senku recognized it instantly, a sulfur ball capable of storing static charge. He explained how it worked, then demonstrated real static electricity by rubbing the ball with animal hide, boosting the power 10 billion times. Despite easily outclassing Chrome, Senku was genuinely impressed. Even after humanity had been reset to zero, there were still people, like Chrome, who sought to understand the world through curiosity and science. Chrome owned a little hut packed with all sorts of materials he'd collected, and as it turned out, a lot of them were actually quite useful to Senku. The two hit it off right away, becoming instant best buds. Chrome even granted Senku full access to his laboratory. To return the favor, and to show Chrome just how much of a genius he really was, Senku grabbed some cinnabar, crushed it up, and heated it to extract mercury. Then he mixed in some dust and other bits, dipped Kinro's spearhead into it, and finished by putting it over a flame. The result? A shiny, gold-plated spear, sparkling like something out of a fantasy RPG. Thanks to that glorious weapon, Senku earned himself a VIP pass to stay in the village alongside Chrome. Aside from minerals, Chrome had also gathered a ton of herbs, ingredients he'd been hoarding in hopes of finding a cure for Ruri, the village priestess, Kohaku's sister, and his childhood friend. That night, Senku told Chrome all about the old world, the civilization that had thrived 3.700 years ago and then vanished in an instant. While Chrome was still mourning all the lost knowledge of humanity's golden age, Senku reassured him. Don't sweat it, all that knowledge still exists, right here in my head. And with that, Chrome officially joined the Science Kingdom team to rebuild civilization from scratch. Their first mission, create antibiotics to cure Ruri. Basically, there were two ways to make them, the biological route, producing penicillin from living organisms, or the Stone Age route, making sulfur-based drugs from minerals. Given their lack of labs and petri dishes, the Stone Age route was clearly the better choice. The process was, complicated, so let's just say if you really want to know the details, you'll need a flowchart, because even Senku's like, bro, I can't explain that in one sentence. That night, as the group relaxed under the starry sky, Senku started dropping more science facts on Kohaku and Chrome. He pointed out that the North Star always points north, except Chrome noticed it was slightly off. Senku took a closer look and realized he was right, not just the North Star, but all the stars had shifted slightly. After 3.700 years, Earth's axis had tilted. But wait, how did Chrome even know which one was the North Star? If Senku wanted to know, Chrome was more than happy to brag. He pulled out a special rock he'd found on a mountain, one that always pointed north when floating on water. Senku immediately recognized it, magnetite, the key component of a compass. And the first step to finding the next essential ingredient for antibiotics, iron. The next day, they went out to collect iron sand from a stream Chrome knew about. There, they met a little girl wearing a melon on her head. Her name was Suika. Suika offered to help, and Senku was like, sure, why not? The Kingdom of Science never turns down free labor. By the end of the day, they had gathered plenty of iron-rich rocks, but the material wasn't usable yet. They'd need to mix it with charcoal at a 4:1 ratio and heat it to 1.500 degrees Celsius to get real iron. Problem: regular firewood could only reach about 700 degrees Celsius max. Solution: bellows-powered furnaces. So the team started manually pumping air to feed oxygen into the fire, but with so few people, they could barely keep the temperature up. Senku realized he needed more manpower, and there was only one way to get it. Use science as bait. By giving people exactly what they wanted. After getting the latest, top-secret report from Detective Suika, who had been out gathering intel, Senku finally realized one universal truth: nothing attracts people more than food. While watching Suika play with a dog, he noticed the little girl was holding some wild foxtail millet, and right then, a brilliant and delicious idea popped into his head. He was going to revive the greatest food in the world. The next day, the team went out to harvest wild foxtail millet, smashed the stalks to collect the seeds, then soaked them in jars of water. They stirred and stirred to get rid of all the fuzzy hairs, chaff, and bad seeds, until only the plumpest grains remained. Then, they ground the millet into powder. Voila! Stone Age flour, foxtail millet edition. Time for the cooking show. Senku mixed the flour with bird eggs, softened it using potassium carbonate, kneaded it well, stretched it into noodles, and chopped it up into bite-sized strands. After tossing in seasonings and toppings, the group officially created the first bowl of prehistoric ramen. Sure, it couldn't compare to modern ramen, but to people who had only ever eaten grilled fish every single day, this was straight-up 5-star gourmet cuisine. Senku pulled his ramen cart through the village, serving bowls left and right to win over the people, watching everyone slurp like there was no tomorrow. He grinned, because the more they ate, the more strength they'd have to work their butts off for him the next day. But then, out of nowhere, a guy appeared, eating ramen and demanding a Coke. Kohaku immediately shouted for Kinro and Ginro to surround the stranger. Senku, though, recognized him instantly. It was Asagiri Gen, a mentalist, illusionist, and author of several books on psychology and how to read people. Gen kept insisting he was just a harmless traveling magician, but Senku wasn't buying it. Accidentally or not, the guy had eaten ramen, and that meant one thing: time to work off your debt. Thanks to that, the team managed to forge their first iron bar. Impressed by Senku's brilliance, Gen confessed his true identity. He was sent by Tsukasa's Empire of Strength to verify whether Senku was really dead. And he admitted, if Senku truly managed to produce metal weapons, the war between science and brute strength would be far from one-sided. Gen was a slippery guy, loyal, yes, but only to the winning side. Kohaku, seeing how crafty he was, wanted to lock him up or finish him off right there. But Senku stopped her. If Gen got hurt, Tsukasa would find out. Instead, Senku planned to recruit him to the Science Kingdom, using science itself as bait. His offer? A generator. Hearing that, Jen blinked. Wait, is this guy insane? Of course not, 10 billion% sane. Luckily, Chrome's hut already had a copper bar. All Senku needed now was a lightning bolt. And just as he said that, thunder cracked across the sky. A storm was rolling in. The crew rushed to work. Following Senku's instructions, they took a plank from the bridge, carved it into a mold, melted the copper, and poured it in to make a long wire. They coated both the copper wire and the iron bar with lacquer for insulation. Meanwhile, the village guys heard rumors that some dark sorcerer was forcing villagers into hard labor, so they came running, thinking General was the culprit, and got scared half to death. Back with Team Science, they needed to find a place with the most lightning strikes. The perfect spot? The same mountain where Chrome had found magnetite. But once they arrived, a problem arose. They needed a tall lightning rod. The perfect candidate? Kinro's golden spear. Despite Kinro's teary protests, Kohaku yanked it away, attached the iron bar, and planted it in the ground just in time. Kaboom! A bolt of lightning struck, and they had successfully created an electromagnet. With the key component secured, Senku moved straight into the next step, building the electric generator. He had the food-motivated workers melt more copper, cast it into thin plates, and then Chrome used corundum, the second hardest mineral after diamond, to cut the copper into circular discs for the generator wheels. Senku handled the wire coating process himself, carefully applying layers of lacquer. By the end of the day, they finally completed it, a fully functional, human-powered hand-crank generator that required 2 people to spin the handles at the same steady rhythm. So, the chosen dream team for the hand-crank generator was none other than Kinro and Ginro, the Golden and Silver brothers themselves. General Ever the smooth talker whispered sweetly to them, "Come on, be good boys and crank that generator. Once we've got electricity, we can make silver, gold, riches, whatever your shiny hearts desire." And just like that, the 2 brothers started cranking with the enthusiasm of lottery winners. Once electricity was finally flowing, Senku declared, "The first thing humanity must create is light. Electric light, the very thing that once illuminated the world before the Great Petrification." Sure, they didn't have tungsten to make fancy bulbs yet, but even a rough version was still a miracle. As everyone marveled at the light, Jen stepped outside and was suddenly attacked. The assailant punched him hard, so hard he couldn't fight back, then stabbed him straight through with a spear. The science crew ran to the scene and found Jen lying motionless, covered in blood. For a second, it looked like he was a goner. But then Senku noticed something. The blood wasn't real. Jen had actually prepared fake blood packs beforehand to cushion the stab and fool his attacker. Thanks to his quick thinking, Jen lived to see another day. They carried him back to Chrome's hut to patch him up. Now everyone wanted to know, who was the psycho behind this ambush? No need to wonder long, Detective Suika was on the case. She soon found the culprit, Magma, the second strongest man in the village after Kohaku. Turns out, Magma attacked Jen because he thought this mighty sorcerer might steal the spotlight from him in the upcoming village tournament. Last time, even though Magma crushed every other guy in the competition, he still lost to Kohaku. And because the village law says the winner gets to marry the priestess Ruri, Kohaku's sister, that would have been awkward, to say the least. So the tournament was being held again. If Magma became the new chief, all their plans to create medicine for Ruri and the progress of the Kingdom of Science would go straight down the drain. The only way to stop him? Someone from Senku's team had to win. The best candidates were, of course, the golden duo, Kinro and Ginro. So Kohaku began personally training them, pushing the brothers to level up their skills before the big event. The next day, however, the group discovered that Jen had disappeared. Everyone panicked, thinking he might have gone to report back to Tsukasa. But Senku wasn't worried. After what they'd talked about the night before, he knew he had already won Jen's loyalty through the power of science. More specifically, through the promise of making him a bottle of Coca-Cola. And sure enough, Senku was right. When Jen returned to Tsukasa's headquarters, he told the boss that Senku was dead and that he'd only found a small primitive village of Stone Age people, effectively buying more time for Senku's side. Back in the Science Kingdom, Senku got back to work on his next goal, making medicine. But before that, they needed glass to create proper containers for chemical substances. It would also help fix Suika's nearsightedness, since the reason she always wore that watermelon helmet was because of the pinhole effect. It helped her see better. First, they had to gather the materials. For glass, the key ingredient was quartz sand. They ground it into fine powder, mixed it with calcium carbonate from seashells and seaweed ash, added a bit of lead, and then heated everything in a furnace. After melting, shaping, and cooling it, Senku produced the first glass lenses of the new age. To make corrective lenses for Suika, he needed concave lenses, so he built a grinding machine with blades made from corundum, the second hardest mineral after diamond, to shape the glass precisely. After checking Suika's vision, they carefully ground the lens to fit her eyes perfectly. And with that, humanity once again had glasses, built right into Suika's iconic watermelon helmet. Senku and Chrome took her to a flower field to test them out. When Suika put on her new glasses and saw the world clearly for the first time, she burst into tears. But Suika wasn't the only one with poor eyesight. During training, Ginro noticed that his brother Kinro also struggled to see well in battle and urged him to ask Senku for help. However, Kinro's pride wouldn't let him admit it, no matter how much his blurry vision got in the way. Meanwhile, Team Science continued their experiments with glassmaking. They melted old bottles to harvest the air bubbles, which could serve as insulation material for the glass furnace. Then, they built an iron blowpipe to shape molten glass. Everything was going smoothly, except for the glass-blowing part. That stage was a total disaster, since it required the skilled hands of a true craftsman, and, well, no one there had ever blown glass before. Hearing that, Chrome suddenly remembered old Kaseki, the master craftsman who had built Kohaku's shield and most of the village's infrastructure. So, without overthinking, Chrome just straight up tied the old man up and kidnapped him to beg for help. But Kaseki, stubborn as a rock, refused to lend a hand to what he called dark sorcery from outsiders. That's when Senku, the ultimate manipulator of hearts, stepped in. He calmly started blowing a few horribly misshapen glass blobs, so ugly that Kaseki couldn't stand looking at them. His craftsman pride was physically in pain. The old man's eyes twitched, his veins popped, and finally, snap, he broke free from the ropes, yelling, "Out of the way, you amateurs, let me show you how a real artist works." In no time, the old man was deep in his element, blowing glass like a legend, and soon enough, he had crafted a fully equipped chemistry lab. And just like that, the Kingdom of Science had gained another genius member. Watching all the shiny new glassware, Ginro got a cheeky idea. He whispered to his brother, "Hey, what if we ask Senku to make us some gold and silver spheres? You know, for the tournament. Totally practical, right?" So the two brothers went to Senku with their ridiculous request. Ginro, as usual, smooth-talked his way through, and somehow, it worked. Senku agreed to make him a silver-tipped spear, but not out of generosity or kindness. No, it was purely for science. Because the silver spear wasn't just a weapon, it was a detector for what they were about to face next. A deadly, invisible, and odorless gas. The only way to detect it? When silver reacts with the gas, it turns black, which means if your spear goes dark, it's time to grab your butt and run for your life. Why on earth would Senku willingly go searching for such a deadly substance? Is this gas somehow part of the cure for Kohaku's sister Ruri? And where will the Kingdom of Science's next insane adventure lead them? Find out in the next episode. I'm Annie Retelling, thanks for watching, and see you next time.